Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Peace, brothers and sisters, dear viewers, wherever you are. Today I've got a very esteemed guest with me, Saeed Mirza. He is one of the first ones that I encountered when I was deep diving into the Quran. And Alhamdulillah, he has done a lot of work. His website, his books, everything I'll be putting in the descriptions. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Mr. Saeed. So, inshallah. Okay, brother, let us know about you, sir.
Peace be upon you. My name is Said Mirza, and I'm living in the US. 40 years old now, and I started my Quran alone journey when I was 26. And basically, I just got tired of the corporate world and the Western secular civilization, if you will. And I was living in, I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, so I knew a little bit of the old world values. And when I came here, I saw that they were completely destroyed. So I had a little bit of a deeper understanding of what was going on. And I realized that even the religion that I was born into, that religion had been, to use, I guess, the best term would be it was hijacked
Yeah.
by people a long time ago. And what they did was they corrupted the teachings of the Quran and made the religion into a superficial religion that was devoid of any deeper purpose and understanding. So God guiding me to the path. I repented to Him, and He showed me the truth in the Quran. And it's been a long journey, but it's been a satisfying journey, fulfilling journey for me. I've done quite a lot of work on the Quran alone phase. So as Brother Asif mentioned, I have a website and I've written books on the subject of Islam and the Quran. My latest book, God's Writ in the Quran, is also, I think, a good starting point for someone who wants to understand what the Quran wants, a believer to do, and ultimately win God's satisfaction and attain the garden.
Brilliant, brother. So, well, everybody like has their own turning point in life when when they cut off from the herd and they come to God.
Hmm.
So, like, obviously, in your time, what were the main sort of challenges that you faced? Was it like family, or was it like to reshaping your beliefs?
So when I came to the US, obviously that was a big shock for me. The culture shock was there, and obviously I left my family. I came here to study. So that was sort of my cutting off from the herd point. But it wasn't really that. That wasn't really the moment. It was more of a after I had done my degree and studies and actually started working and in a job, 9 to 5 job, and realizing that it was the futility of it all, really. I mean, what was the point of this? Like, okay, you're going and making a living and you're coming back home sleeping. It was really repetitive, and there was something inside me that I realized that there's more to life than just this. So then I started looking into religion. I was born in a Sunni Muslim family in Karachi. So it's not that I didn't have a religion. I was a Muslim in the sense, as born in the religion of Islam, but I never really looked into the beliefs and the questions. I just did things, like the prayer. I would just do that. So I started really looking deeper into, what the purpose was, why are we doing this, what is God command us to do. So I investigated actually Islam from the Hadith perspective initially, because that's what Muslims think of. They think of Hadith every time.
Exactly.
So I obviously studied a lot of Hadiths, and God guided me. It's not. I'm not taking credit for this. I repented to Him, and He showed me the truth. I stumbled across information, and after reading the Quran, I realized that what I had been taught was basically a lie, and the Quran is a different message altogether. It's to serve God, in the truest sense of the word. And then I got into back into my family life, and I got married and I had kids, and then I obviously worked again. So this kind of phase, I was over that, and then God again in His mercy, He guided me again. So when I turned in my mid 30s is when I really started looking at these questions. I had my midlife crisis early, if you will, and my I came across Brother Garen's work, Sam Garen's, and he was able to answer a lot of questions I had, and after that I just dedicated myself to serving God alone.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, what is like the main difference that you find in traditional Islam and the Quran alone? Is the religion different, Or would you even call it a religion?
I mean, so if you look in the Quran for the word deen, the deen is actually a transaction. That's what the word means. Deen is a transaction. And why is it a transaction? Because we are transacting with God. We are doing good deeds, and we are believing in Him and His promise. And uh, that's the part that we are fulfilling. And then God is fulfilling His part, where He is not only guiding us, but He's also helping us, supporting us, and then He will give us the final reward on the hereafter. That's why it's called Yawm ad-Din, because it's the
Exactly.
day of that transaction, the ultimate. You will get what you deserve on that day. So, Islam has made the Deen of God, the doctrine of God, into uh, basically movements. It's the prayer is one of those things, but also it's very superficial because it only encourages things that it's all about virtue signaling, and also it's about making yourself feel good. And what you end up with is the mishmash we have, because the Islam, it changes. It's a chimera. I mean, if you look at the Islam 30 years ago, in Pakistan, how it was practiced. This is not the Islam that's being practiced in the West. So it's changing its colors depending on the political climate, and the social climate. So there is nothing to hold it down. There's no roots, because again, they have forgotten that the Quran is actually the source. So obviously with the Quran also they did a lot of things where they changed the meanings of words. And when I'm saying they, I'm not talking about some shadowy force. I'm talking about the Muslims themselves, the
Yeah.
Muslims of old. They have over time, change. They've had the book for 1400 years, or so the claim. So obviously they've had time to change the book, not the words itself, because that's protected. God's preserved His word, but they are able to twist the meanings of the words. Nothing new. The Bani Israel Quran, it says that they were doing the same thing. So it's not that they came up with this new scheme, but what they did was they were able to force this religion into the Quran, and use certain parts of the Quran to help build this foundation. But really, what the Quran is talking about is fearing God. Muttaqin, those fearful of God, those reverent of God, those who understand that God has the ultimate power and He will take people to task on the day. I think those people, for them, the Quran is giving them the guidance, which is the Al-Kitab. That's the writ. That's the law. So it's very important that we understand the law and follow the law. That's what those who are prudent fear, those who are successful. This is what they do. The religion of Islam has no concept of this. What they have a concept of is, you do the prayers, and you say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and you expect Muhammad to intercede on the day of judgment, and then everything is great. But you're seeing what's happening right now. This obviously God has let go of them. It's really, that's what it is. They just don't understand that this is God's punishment that's on them right now. So yeah, I think that's in a nutshell the difference between the religion of Islam and the Deen of God in the Quran. It's a more of a worldview, completely different worldview than the religion of Islam is teaching you, really.
A brilliant point when you begin answering that is when one day I was listening to Muhammad Iqbal. You know Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. He did a translation, and somebody asked him, "What do you think about Deen?" And he said something amazing, because your language and my language, Urdu, we have a word called leen deen.
Yeah.
So deen means, like, it's like give and take.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly like on the day of judgment, it's give and take. And
Mm-hmm.
deen, as in, like, you give something, or like you sacrifice something, and you get the pleasure of Allah.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. That's what God keeps saying in the Quran. He says, "Lend a goodly loan." I mean, think about that. God has no need of anything,
Exactly.
but
That
He
is the
He has
most.
given us. He
That
has
is a
given us.
Yeah, one of the most emotional verses I find in the Quran is that when
Yeah.
God is saying to you, "Give, lend me
Uh-huh.
a loan," like,
Yeah.
Subhanallah, brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. He has no need of anything, but he has prescribed for himself mercy, and also he has set up this thing so we when with our efforts uh, we will gain the ultimate reward. I mean, at this if you think about God, the paradise, I mean, that is the ultimate reward. There's no doubt about it, and obviously we'll be tested in this life. But those who hold fast to God and the Quran, they will receive what they are due, no doubt.
Brilliant, inshallah. So, what do you think about shirk? Because shirk is something which is like, I think is the epitome of judgment. Like it's that's the main criteria. If you fail that, you're doomed. So shirk in the traditional religions is something different than the shirk you find in the Quran. Can you elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, so I mean, again, the religion of Islam, they understand shirk in a very basic sense. They understand shirk to mean, if you call to someone besides God and expect them to help, right? I mean, they always keep saying the Christians are mushrikeen because they are calling to Jesus. They expect Jesus to save them, and that Jesus is the Son of God. But if you look in the Quran carefully for the word mushrik, I actually in my book Will You Not Reason, I dedicated a whole chapter to that because I wanted to show that in the Quran's worldview, shirk is a much more nuanced. In the Quranic worldview, shirk is about as is not only just ascribing a partnership to the God in the sense that he has sons or daughters, that's a given, but there's also a more deeper uh, sense of shirk that you are expecting someone to help you. Because God alone is the helper, God alone is the protector. Um,
That's true.
you, if you are expecting someone to give you rulings, commands, or injunctions, that is also shirk. In the Quran, God says, He says, do they have partners that ascribe to them of doctrine that which God has not given leave? So he's talking about, in a sense, which is really common to Muslims. What they do is they'll take a mufti's rulings, right? And they'll just say, okay, this mufti said this, and this is binding upon me. But that's just a mufti saying it. Unless
Exactly.
he is coming from the Quran and giving those guidance from the Quran, then that's you ascribing a partnership with God because you are obeying Him in matters of doctrine which God has reserved for Himself. Let me back up a little bit here because I think this is one of those things that people don't realize. In Islam, this whole Sharia law, which is now Sharia law, Sharia law, Sharia law. Okay, what is the Sharia law? Sharia law is the Muslims saying that the Hadith have the same footing as the Quran. But this is not allowed in the Quran because God alone is the giver of laws. So whatever God's writ, whatever God's law is the scope of God's law. You cannot add or remove or modify any of God's commandments. But Muslims routinely do this. They take hadith literature, the sheikhs and muftis, they take the hadith literature and then they change the verses of the Quran. And so in my book God's writ in the Quran, that's what I've really tried to drive home the point that God's writ, His laws are all you need. You don't need to add or remove or explain them. They are already, explained in detail. You can also have laws aside from God's writ as long as they don't conflict with God's writ. You see, so people say, how do you know how to drive? We need traffic laws. Yeah, I understand your traffic laws. The Quran doesn't give you traffic laws, but that's a separate issue. The Quran, that's not within the scope of God's writ. You see,
Yeah.
but God's writ is clear on like murder and life for life, an eye for an eye. It's clear on commerce. You can't do usury. It's clear on fornication, what the punishments are, and what that constitutes. You need to bring four witnesses. So this is all there. The due process is there. So coming back to the point of the shirk, if you believe that your power, your wealth, your children can help you, that's also shirk. We read in the Quran the story where the two men they're arguing, and then one of them he says, I'm greater than you in wealth and children, and the other says, you should when you enter the garden you should say la hawla wala quwwat, no power save in God. And then then in the morning his garden is finished, ruined.
Mhm.
God makes it nothing, and then he says, would that I had not ascribed a partnership with my Lord. So he never in that story did he ascribe a partnership to God in the sense that he said they are two gods, or Lakshmi will help me, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. All he said to the guy was, my I have more wealth and children, as in he expected that to be some sort of kind of like a bulwark against any calamity.
True.
But
True.
God made it clear to him that no, God, protection belongs to God alone. So ultimately, I think this is the fine point that Muslims are missing, that you cannot expect Prophet Muhammad to intercede for you on the day of judgment because God alone has the right to intercede. And by you saying this stuff, you are dancing with shirk. And if you go in the masajid, you see Allah and Muhammad both names side by side. Masajid, the masajid are for God alone. So
That's true.
these things, they've over time they've accumulated. Muslims are really sitting on the threshold. They're almost there. It's just a matter of some guy coming in sooner or later and saying Muhammad was the son of God, because that is ultimately what will happen if they continue down this path. Um, and God knows best, but in the Quran, because the whole study for shirk is important, because God says that is one um, sin that I will not forgive. So you need to be clear on what shirk is. You don't want to end up on the day of judgment and then realize, oh, I was doing shirk. And on the day of judgment, this is one of the things that it talks about in the Quran. It says that on the day of judgment, they will say, we were not mushrikeen,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't even realize, if you talk to Christians and you tell them about this, they'll be like, no, we don't, we say it's one God, but then they have this whole story about it being three and one, etc., etc., but they will never say that there are two gods. They will all say one God. But they will shirk. That's shirk. That's being, you
Yeah.
ascribing to God a partnership.
They're doing a subconscious lie. Consciously, they'll say one God,
Yes.
but then they believe in a three number or something. Okay, so
Yeah.
brilliant point you made that when somebody goes to a mufti and says, "Oh, give me a fatwa." So basically, in the Quranic, I'm not going to use religion, deen. Allah is the mufti, Allah is the Maulana, Allah is the authority for everything. You
Yeah.
don't need anybody. So, if, for example, we wake up tomorrow and we find that the whole Muslim world, whatever Muslim world, is following the Quran and the Hadith books have disappeared. So, a lot of the jobs will be lost, like the job of the masjid, the imam, the muazzin, the charity taker, the dawa people, and
Yeah.
all of them.
Uh-huh.
So, there's like a whole big financial
Industry.
institution based on this. So, it's
Yeah.
like a business.
It's a big industry. It's always been an industry. I mean, you think about like the muftis and sheikhs and imams, but then you go and you look at the priests and monks and rabbis. They're well-off men. You hear the stories that they're dying of hunger back in the day, but they were always well-off men, because the religion and state, they're connected.
Yes.
They always been connected, because religion derives its power from God, and state derives its power from men. So these are two authorities, and so there's always this sort of like tug of war. But the people who rule, they know how men's minds work. They understand the psychology really well. So for them, it's just a matter of giving a little bit there and then taking a little bit from the other side. So with the religion aspect of it, I mean, Islam was crafted in the sense by the kings and the caliphs, or whatever you want to call them, the men who were ruling, to serve their purposes. And this is really, really key. I mean, this did not happen on its own. This is one of the things that when Brother Gans came on the scene, um, I always thought that the Hadith corruption happened over time, kind of just naturally. But he made that point, and I now that I think about him, like he was right, that this was done over time by intelligent men who knew what they were doing. They always keep talking about the Christians and the Nicene Council, and how that was the sort of the tipping point where Christianity became big, because they kind of formulated the doctrines that they needed. But I'm sure that's what happened with Islam. Islam really took off when the state came behind it, and kind of formalized it into this thing. And all it did was they corrupted the Quranic teachings, because the Quran's emphasis is on personal responsibility. It's on confronting evil. It's on speaking the truth. And also they keep. I think it's one of my last videos I talked about the verse where they keep talking about you should follow the ulu al umar,
Oh yeah.
the possessors of command.
Yeah.
And the muftis, they love that. They were like, there you go, follow us. But
Exactly.
it's not
They
talking about you.
twisting the verses. They don't. It's not being talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they, again, they a lot of them, because like the Quran is al kafirun, that group. the brother Gans, when he came out with that translation and he looked at the instances of Al Kafirun, he realized that these are the religionists. These are the men who claim to be guided when they're not guided. So what the muftis and sheikhs they're doing is they're taking their authority from the Quran, and there's no problem in them taking authority if they follow the Quran, if they follow God's writ.
True.
It says in the Quran, it says that you have that you have nothing to stand upon unless you uphold the Torah and the gospel. Similarly, the muftis and sheikhs do not have any authority unless they uphold the Quran, which they don't do. They routinely uh, circum you know circumscribe it, or try to get rid of it so they can insert their own stuff in there. So I mean, what's happening now is that the state is so powerful now that they are using every means. The Saudis are pushing Islam, this Islam, and they're constantly changing it because they have to bring it in line with the if you want to use the word new world order, which is already here. It's more of the kind of just like the last vestiges of Islam, where you had the things that were that were for instance usury or fighting in God's cause. Now they're trying to finish everything, and so make it into a very sanitized religion.
Very true, very true. So, as you've mentioned Saudi, what do you think about Umrah and Hajj? What is this?
It's I think it's well, I when I first went there, I did Umrah
Hmm.
when I was 14, right? And I was always thought, oh, this is this thing, and the idol and the Kaaba, and it's such a sacred site, etc., etc. So I did all that, and I came back, and I didn't see a change in me. It was the same, routine. Then when God guided me, when I was 19, 20, and I saw what it was, then my eyes were open. And it's like one of those things, people say, when you see, you can't unsee. So
Hmm.
I saw it, and it's one of those things that people have argued with me for many years, even my uncles, my relatives, everyone, because obviously in our Islam deen, the Kaaba, how can you say this is an idol? This is not an idol. This is the Kaaba.
Yeah,
Ibrahim built it.
yeah.
Um, but this is all they're fairy tales. The
Yeah,
Quran,
because Allah
yeah,
doesn't
go ahead.
say that, oh, Ibrahim was picking up bricks and Ismail was giving him the cement or something, you know?
He was not a builder. He was not a mason. He is not an architect. He was a man of God. He was, obviously, I'm sure you could learn that trade, but it's not that he knew how to build structures. That's the first
True,
thing. But
true.
if you look in the Quran itself for what this thing is, like I said, it says that the first house was established in Makkah. It doesn't say Makkah. That's the first problem. And then Muslims say Makkah means Makkah. Well, that's your stories. The Quran uses Makkah too, and
Yeah.
you could take it to mean as a stomach or interior. That's fine. Or even if you take it as a proper noun, regardless, the Quran uses the word Makkah. So obviously, Makkah and Makkah are not the same thing. The second problem is, I think a lot of these things, the rituals, if you start really thinking about it, like the Hajj and Umrah, right? The defining thing is the seven circumambulations, right, around the
Yeah.
Kaaba.
Yeah.
That is the defining thing, right? They do it when they come, and then they do it when they leave. This whole thing, seven thing, is very important in that whole ritual.
Yeah.
The seven times around the Safa al Marwa, the throwing of the stones, seven stones on the three pillars. Um, this is all pagan stuff because first of all, the Quran doesn't give you these details. It doesn't, nowhere does it say all this stuff. So you're making stuff up. And the other thing is, um, I think this is one of the keys when you realize that uh, it's a stone idol, and it doesn't need to have eyes and ears and hands or mouth to be an idol.
True.
The Obviously the Hindus have those, but the Arabs, if you look into the Nabatean culture, they used to have these idols, square-shaped idols. In Petra, they found this, so it's not something that I'm just pulling out of a hat. They used to worship these stone blocks. Even in our culture, you're from Pakistan, that the rings, the wearing of the rings, and the stones associated with that. That's a very powerful symbolic, like
Yes, yes,
akik and all this, the
yes,
stones they use.
yes.
So this is worshiping stones again because you're thinking the stone can protect you. This is the, if you start thinking about what a god is, a god is something, someone, an entity that protects you, right? It guides you, it gives you life, so if you take those attributes and you give them to something else, that's idol worship right there, you know. So the Muslims, when they go to the Makkah and they do the worship the 7 times and they come back and they say, we're clean, our sins are forgiven. God
Yeah,
is the one who forgives, not
exactly.
an idol.
How
You
come?
don't have to go and
Yeah,
do all that. You can just pray in your closet, and God will forgive you. He says he's the ever forgiving. But you
yes.
don't believe that. You have to spend all this money and do all this pagan stuff. And unfortunately, this is something that God can show you. No matter what you read or what you do, at the end of the day, God will show you or He won't show you. And if you don't see it, then that's the way it is.
You did a very nice video, last one, hijab. So, I, in my view, I see that they've been like really controlling women and holding them down. And
Hmm.
because of that, the whole society is like the Muslim Islamic society is so down because the women are not participating. Now, when they think of participation, they think that women are gonna create vulgarity or this, that. No, it's all about how you take it. And Allah has given us hududullah. You can't cross
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
Please elaborate a bit. What do you think if the Quran alone, if there's a Quran alone city, right?
Hmm.
How are the women gonna be appropriately dressed and not too much oppressed as well at the same time? What would that be?
So I mean, the thing with the Kitabul Allah, the God's writ, is that it like I said, it's flexible. It gives
Mm,
you flexibility, and that's not a, Brother Gans said it's not a bug, it's a feature. Why? Because what it's doing is giving you guidelines for the end of days, right? Because God's revelation, this is it. Nothing else is coming. I mean, nothing else is gonna come. This is it. And if this revelation has been around for a while, it's going to continue to be around. I mean, God knows best. But I mean, if we expect it to go for another 100, 200, 1,000 years, whatever, then we would expect it to give you some flexibility. And that's what the religion of Islam is lacking. Because of the hadith, they kind of put themselves in a bind because they have these hadith that are so ridiculous that in this day and age, there's no way you can establish any sort of, you know,
yeah,
country.
exactly. It
You
doesn't
can't
matter.
do it because it's like, I don't know if you read Brother Garen's book, The God Protocol. Definitely worth a read.
No, I
And
haven't.
he talks about the problem of the traditionalist. The traditionalist problem is that he understands that what's happening now is so immoral. He understands that. He understands that we are basically heading over a cliff. There's no denying that. And I don't think it's just the traditionalists. Any thinking man knows that what we have right now is not sustainable. The destruction of everything, the family, culture, religions, righteousness, everything. What you end up with is you're finished, right? But so to avert that, he wants to impose this Islam, right? But the problem is that his Islam is not meant for the world we live in. And there's no going back. After the Industrial Revolution, after electricity, after the opening up of
Internet.
uh, the internet, yeah, obviously that's kind of a later development, but I'm talking more in the 18th century.
Oh yeah,
This whole democracy,
yeah,
Pandora's box that you open, there's
yeah.
no going back. Even though obviously democracy is a lie, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Kings, I don't know. I didn't live under a king. I don't know if that was better or worse, but definitely God talks about the kings, Dawood and Suleiman.
Yeah.
And obviously in the story of Yusuf, we have the king. He was a righteous man. So uh, they were righteous kings, and now what we have is basically these false leaders running the show, and they're not really in power, right? That's what democracy is. You elect a bunch of people. They come in 4 years. They push this agenda through. You get tired of them, you kick them out. The next set comes, they're the same clowns in the same different dress, and they're doing the same thing. The agenda doesn't change. So what we have now is obviously we need to change that, but the problem is you don't have the laws, and the laws are here in the Quran, right? This is God's revealed law. So I think if you want to set up an Islamic state in the sense of Quran alone, the Deen of God, you would need to have these laws in place. First of all, serve not save God, ascribe not a partnership to Him, do not kill an innocent, and obviously immorality. That's a big one.
Right.
And It's not about oppressing women. See, people always have this backwards. I think that the Western people are more oppressive to women. Why? Because um, they are the ones producing the pornographic movies.
True, true. That's
Is
true.
that not oppression?
That
That
is
is
that
the
is
biggest
psychological,
oppression.
psychological cage.
Psychologically, not only for for the women, for the men as well.
Yeah.
You're destroying men's minds. You're destroying women's minds, corrupting society. But you're the ones that are purveying it. All these sites, they're Western owned. Nobody's gonna say, oh, this is not, something that the U.S. is not doing. The U.S. is doing it. So when they talk about, women's oppression, what's your idea of freedom? Is this your
Yeah.
idea of freedom?
Yeah.
I
No,
don't want that.
what I meant was the third world nations are right now third world because firstly religion has been controlling them heavily. Secondly, political systems have not
Uh-huh.
let them flourish, and
Hmm.
they've been studying textbooks which are obsolete in the
Yeah,
schools.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
everybody who tries to like develop themselves, they all end up outside like you and me,
yeah.
and countries like
It's a very we're in difficult times, brother. That's all I can tell you because we don't really. The thing is, nobody understands the problem. So if you don't understand the problem, you're not going to come up with a solution. And I don't think it's even an understanding; it's a refusal to understand the problem because ultimately it would require you to abandon the religion of your ancestors. And that Muslims will not do. And I think this is the key. If this has not really served you well, the religion of Islam, so you need to go back and look at it and say, look, if it's true and it actually makes sense, we'll do it. If not, then what's the point? And there's a fear among Muslims where in the third world countries where they think this is the only thing they have that the West wants to take away from them. And unfortunately, they got into this position because God is punishing them because they let go of what they had in the first place. You see, so what they have now is just the corrupt teachings of their, Bukharis and you know
Tirmizi and
Tumdi
Majid.
and all these other, Zamakashari and Razi and all these guys. What you have is corrupt teachings. There's nothing to do with the doctrine of God. So you need to go back to the Quran, which God says is preserved. Look into it and try to figure out a solution. Women are oppressed over there. I agree 100% in the sense that they have these archaic laws where women are supposed to dress in a certain manner, and men have the upper hand to the point where men are just completely they can do whatever they want. But the Quran is protecting the rights of women. If you look in the Quran, for just to give you an example about fornication, where it says, the adulteress or the fornicator, if you need to bring four witnesses, so you can't just go around willy nilly, charging women of
Mhm.
fornicating. And in the case of a man, if a husband, accuses his wife of fornication, he needs to swear, and then she needs to swear, and then he needs to swear. This continues on. The last swearing is by the woman. So you think about that. Woman has the final. So
Hmm.
if the final, it stops there. Then after that, if she has lied, then that's a matter between her and God. But the proceedings stop. You see, the man doesn't have the final say. This is a big thing.
So in the dunya, Allah still is giving the woman a parda, like a barrier, like a veil. Like the woman can take that in, and she can like hide her sin, and only Allah knows at that time, and the husband can go on. So meaning to say, Allah is still giving the woman more power in the sense
Yeah,
of
I mean,
making a
so
decision.
in the inheritance laws, you have the right for the woman to inherit. Obviously, the man is given double the share, and again, the reason is that men are protectors and maintainers of women. That is the Quranic criteria. We shouldn't lose sight of that, because the Western idea of a man and woman is they are equal and
Mm.
that they are the same, and it's not true because God says the male is not like the female. and the men are protectors and maintainers of women. So there's a status quo that needs to be maintained. And now
Yeah.
within that, obviously, even though that men are maintainers and protectors, women are still allowed to inherit. You could
True.
say, oh, okay, men are the ones running the house. But God is giving the rights. So the rights are there. It's the twisted mentality of the Westerners to make everything equal, whatever that equality means. And you cannot, it can never be equal. People are not created equal. Everyone has a
No.
different skill set, capability, intelligence, height. We can go on and on. Nothing. It's not as easy as saying men and women are equal. By doing this, what you're doing is you're divorcing men and women of their true potential. A man can only function and be excellent in life if he has a good wife, in the sense that she is taking care of his primary needs. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. And a woman, she needs a strong man to run the household. And it never says in the Quran that man has the final say. It says that the mushawarat, it says to you can consult between them. In the case of or when there's a divorce and you're taking care of the child, then you should consult with each other. um,
Exactly.
it's one of those things that I don't disagree that in Pakistan especially, that women are trampled upon, but there needs to be a balance. You can't have what the Western civilization wants, because now it's always funny. I think about how far we've fallen, because in the Quran, God says that He is giving. If a woman is charged with uh, you know fornication, then you need to bring four witnesses, like I said. But the Quran doesn't talk about a man being charged with the accusation of fornication, right? Doesn't talk about that, because this is what's happening in the West. In the U.S., if you are in the right, regardless whether you did it or not, if
The
um,
woman can put a blame on you, and you
she
can't.
can.
Yeah, you can't get
What are
away
you
with
gonna do in the Quranic sense? Because the
it.
Quran doesn't give you a prescription. Because this was unheard of, you see.
Yeah.
Because a woman would never do that, because it was a matter of honor and shame.
Exactly.
A woman would not do that. But now
True.
it's to the point. And they always keep on talking about Sam Weiss, Sam translating beat the woman.
Yeah.
Okay, what
Yeah.
about beat the man? Because that's what's happening in the West.
Yeah.
It's beat the man. It's like a lot of men, they are the ones who are being victimized. But no one talks about that. No one wants to bring that up. It's
There's a
always the women.
there's a place over here called Reading, and it's like a town, a quite big town, like a city almost. So I was there 2 years ago, and I heard this strange case over there. Like Wednesday night is like somewhat girls' night out, so all the women
Hmm.
are out, and there used to be cases of people, their clothes torn off by women, gang women, 4 or 5 women, calling the police or situation happened. Can you imagine? So this
Yeah.
stuff has been happening here a lot. So it's the same thing. So, but okay, like another thing, when they take 2.5 zakat,
Yeah.
is that like a mob tax? Like on the, what do you call them, on the Eid al Adha, when they're cutting the goats, the
Sure.
Bakra Eid, they want
Uh huh.
the skins, the khal, the
Yeah.
leather,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of that.
Uh
So
huh.
what is this, like a mob tax?
Why? I mean, if you're looking in Pakistan, I mean, what we have in Pakistan is the mafia, right? There's the mafia, there's the land mafia, there's the water mafia, there's the bus mafia, and
Hmm.
these are the mafias, right? So every mafia is extorting men, and no one will stand up against them because they're so powerful. They threaten you with basically death. Um, they use religion in that sense because religion is a powerful tool. So you have the mullah mafia, which what they're doing is they want their cut, 2.5%, and no one is gonna ask them where this money is going, and there's no accountability. Uh, Most of the money probably just ends up being used by the people who are collecting it, or for other purposes. I'm sure some of it does make it to the poor. There's no checks and balances. The Quran doesn't talk about 2.5%. First off, that's a big problem. If because if you count down the pillars of Islam, right? You
Hmm.
have the Shahada, and
Hmm.
then you have the Salat, and you have Som,
Yeah.
Zakat, and Hajj, right?
Okay.
So what is that? The Shahada is the declaration of faith, and
There is
then
a sixth
the
one as well.
prayer.
where they call it that Allah is written everything. As in he knows everything will happen, but
Uh-huh.
they say that, oh, it's not your choice. Like something bad happened, oh, Allah willed
Oh,
it.
predestination.
Yeah,
Okay.
predestination.
Okay, so when I was growing up, there were only five, and this is the problem with the religion of Islam. It keeps on expanding and
Modifying.
expanding, and just makes your life a living hell, because there's always some new thing that you gotta,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess,
like a phone. You have to keep
agree.
upgrading your
Yeah,
operating
exactly. The
system.
terms of service change. So, God has given us the Quran. It's not changing. This is it. Just follow it. But it makes your life a lot easier. But anyway, coming back to the five pillars of the religion of Islam, you have the declaration of faith, the prayer, and then the fasting, and then the zakat and the Hajj. The Quran doesn't talk about five pillars of religion. Obviously, these words are in there, but those words are twisted to mean what they are purporting the religion of Islam. But I always find it interesting that reading the Quran is not a pillar of Islam. And when I say reading, I don't mean reading in the sense you know, just Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, Ar-Rahmani, Maliki Yawmiddin,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going
yeah.
on. I'm
Like
talking
in the
about actually,
Tarawih, like in the
yeah,
Tarawih, go
under,
fire.
understanding a little bit, reading in your language, trying to understand a little bit of what God is wanting us to do. When I was growing up, there was no talk of that. The Quran was on that, on the shelf,
Yeah,
covered and wrapped in, the cloth.
yeah.
And then that's it. People came and then they would probably put it on someone's head,
Yeah,
to give
yeah.
them like a mubarak or
On
whatever.
on
And
on
then
the on the wedding, on the
on the
head of the
wedding day,
woman.
yeah, yeah. And then it would, someone would give a Quran and then go back up there, and so, I found it strange when I first started reading the Quran. I found it strange that, and then always it was the same thing. It's too difficult for us to understand, or it's not in our language, and I thought it's strange that, if it's so difficult to understand, why don't you make the attempt? You're going through, I mean, especially when I was growing up, and I'm sure it's the same with you too. We went through some really rigorous curriculum.
Yeah,
We had to memorize stuff and mathematics and all this stuff, physics. It was really difficult stuff.
yeah.
And so a lot of emphasis was put on that. You need to excel. They would always hire people like tutors or something. Okay, make sure you excel.
Hmm.
But in the case of the Quran, all you got was this guy, the Quran teacher,
Yeah.
the Qari, who would come in and he
Teach you
would
how to recite.
just
If you
how to
don't,
recite, but no one would actually sit down with you and actually go through it and
yeah,
say, look, this is what it means, or what do you think it means? That's such a good activity to do with your children, that you should sit down with them and actually open it up and say, okay, read it, in English or whatever, and what do you think it means? What is the point? But unfortunately, the five pillars of Islam, they have lulled people into sleeping. But again, it calls them pillows of Islam. The pillows, five pillows, you sleep. You go to
which
sleep.
is
You
right.
wake up on the day of judgment. And
You
this
go,
is what it is. As long as you're doing these five things, you're saved. But
yeah,
in the Quran, there's nothing like that. It's a very difficult battle to hold on to the teachings of God and to follow them. It really is.
yeah.
It's nothing to do with just doing five prayers. And then always I keep hearing the same thing. Well, you're lazy. You don't want to do five prayers. And it's
Okay,
like, okay, man.
there's a question that we all get. How do you pray? How do you pray? Tell
Yeah.
me how do you pray. So how do you pray? Tell us. Tell the viewers how do you pray?
So okay, so the way I pray, and when I say pray, I mean the purpose. The purpose is to remember God. In the story of Musa, when God spoke to Musa, He said, "Establish the salat for my remembrance." This is the purpose. If you don't have that purpose behind you, then good luck. Do the
True,
prayers. Not
true.
gonna do anything. You have to remember God, be really sincere, and try to connect with God, right? So, and then the prayer, the way I do it is I do the wudu, which is in the Quran, the ablution, and then I stand up and then I glorify God. There's many verses in the Quran that talk about glorification of God. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, Surah Fatiha is there, and then there's Malikul Mulk, Master of Dominion. And actually I made a compilation of these prayers in my book. Will you not reason? You just need to read that chapter and you'll see the prayers that are in the Quran. So you're supposed to glorify God, and remember Him, ask Him for help and patience, and then you read the Quran. Sometimes I read the Quran standing up, sometimes I sit down, depends really on my energy levels, or um my mood, to be honest with you. There is no set amount of time I do it for. It depends. Like, to make everything so structured, make it difficult for yourself, you're not going to be able to do it regularly. and that's the key. These five prayers are very difficult to implement because people have lives, they have their own responsibilities. And then what happens is that people they just stand up because they have to stand up and do it because they have to do it. I'm not saying there's not time limited decree. There is the Fajr and the Isha, the sunrise and sunset. You have to remember God and do the salat. But what I'm saying is, the Quran doesn't give you the details. Again, it's flexible, right? It's flexible. It's allowing you, depending on your own devotion level. It's up to you. This is the beauty of the Quran. It's not giving you those. Depending on the context, it'll let you be flexible and do it to your own purpose. Again, remember, this is a marathon, not a race.
Exactly.
We're going to be here for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, right? I mean, obviously people wish they'd die tomorrow and all that, but realistically, people live full lives. Obviously accidents happen, but most people live 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
You want to do that, if you want to do five prayers, it's very difficult to sustain that. But if you do those two salat and you keep up with them, it's reasonable. You can do it.
Brilliantly answered, brother. Brilliant. So, what do you think about fasting? If like, because I think that the Shahrul Ramadan is
Hmm.
it's not month of Ramadan. It's entirely something else. What do you think?
Yeah. So, my studies are ongoing on that. To be honest with you, with
Hmm.
with the Shahr Ramadan, I understand it to mean, as far as my understanding currently, um, Shahr means moon, right? And Ramadan means heat. And
Hmm.
so, what God is referencing is that on that day, on Shahr Ramadan, the Quran was revealed. He's referring to an event, a specific event that
Hmm.
happened during the time of Muhammad, right? And it says, those of you who witnesses the moon, witness. So, and it's not witnesses, it's witnessed. It's past tense. I don't want to get too much into the details
Yeah.
technically,
Yeah.
but what I understand it to mean is that this was a specific event that happened during the time of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, and the believers at that time who witnessed this event, they were told that you are to fast. Now, the
Fast.
word fast, psalm, is to abstain. Let's if you really want to get to the brass tacks and say, okay, what does that mean? It says to abstain. Now, in the Quran, there's two places where the abstinence happens with regards to previous people, because God says, we ordained this for people before you. So this is something that was being practiced before. Uh, the Christians have their stories, the Jews have their stories, the Muslims have their stories. But if you look in the Quran itself, there's the abstinence that we have is Zachariah, who was told to abstain for 3 days from talking. And then you have the abstinence of Maryam. She was
Yes.
also abstained from talking. So
Yes.
I'm not saying that to not talk is what it's saying here, but it is an abstinence. I take it to mean an abstinence in the sense that you are to keep away from the worldly life for a bit and, read the scripture and try to get closer to God. That's the abstinence. That's the psalm. That's really what it's about, because that is what's going to give you taqwa. When you
Yeah.
are reading the scripture and you are disconnecting yourself from the worldly life. This is what it's about. Like I said, my studies are ongoing on that.
Mm.
This is my understanding of it. I'm not saying don't fast and don't, keep. Obviously, if you want to fast, do it. Is good for you. That's what the medical community
Yeah.
says,
Yeah.
which that's a separate issue. But
Exactly.
definitely abstaining from food and water for a short amount of time is not bad for you. You gain benefits for it. So I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying that this my understanding is still, I'm not 100% convinced that this is what that means.
Two things that what you said from this means somewhat that if you are to abstain from hearing, you go into a secluded place and you remember God, just like how people used to go into jungles, caves, and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
Also, another thing, thumma, the word
Mhm,
summun means hearing, right? They can't
mhm,
hear, and then
mhm,
som.
mhm.
So the hearing word is connecting to it, and the two verses are about that as well.
Mhm.
The
That's interesting.
Maryam's verse. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, but you're making the connection. If you look in Lane's lexicon for this word psalm,
Hmm.
you'll find it that it's a lot of these words, they have a generalized understanding to them. You can't, like the understanding we have of psalm is very narrow. now, because it's like, okay, this is a religious Muslim fast that you're
Mm.
supposed to do from sunrise to sunset, and you can't eat, you can't drink, and you can't smoke,
Yeah.
and blah 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 blah, that the
Yeah.
muftis put in. Obviously they can't
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
themselves, but you're right. I mean, eh, to me, the purpose is to gain taqwa,
Yeah.
right? And I have fasted in my life a lot. Obviously I came from a Muslim household, Sunni household, so I fasted those 30 days. And let me tell you, man, 30-day fasting does absolutely nothing for you for the
True. And
taqwa.
it kind
At
of
least not
exhausts
for
you.
me.
It kind of
Yeah.
exhausts you as well.
It just makes you angry. By the end of the day, you're hangry, right? That's what they say,
Yeah.
hangry. You're
Yeah.
hangry because
Yeah.
you haven't eaten food. And also, if you I've studied addictions quite a bit in my life, because uh, I've been surrounded by people who are addicted. I myself was addicted to a lot of things.
Mm.
So what happened was, when I was studying addiction, I realized that addiction is one of those things that they always say halt, which means that if you're hungry, you're angry, you're lonely, or you're tired, you're more susceptible to going back to your addiction. And it's because you're not strong to resist, and I realized that, by fasting, you're actually kind of depleting your resources. So
Yeah.
the
He's.
shaitan is able to control you, and actually, I read a book, Montezuma. It was about the Aztecs, and
Mhm.
in their culture, in their religion, look it up. It's actually very interesting because they were a pagan culture in the truest sense.
Quetzalcoatl?
Yes, yeah, yeah. He was finally the what was that guy's name? The Spanish conquistador, Herman Cortez.
Yes, he
He
came.
you know
Yeah.
he went there, and he destroyed their civilization, the religion. But obviously they did take down detailed records of the religion. And the book I was reading, it talked about a little bit about the religion. How they used to worship and used to sacrifice children and animals, and Quran talks about this
Mm,
as well.
mm, mm,
But it was interesting because the emperor, he was himself a priest, and he was a king and a priest,
mm,
which is something that was pretty common. You had to have knowledge of the law. So
mm.
he was a priest, and he used to go up in the secluded place in the mountains. He had like a temple built, and he used to not only fast, in the sense not abstain from water and drink, but also he used to self-immolate. So he would cut himself. You know
Okay,
how the
okay.
the, the Shia do that?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So
So he used to self-immolate.
it's a type of way to get a trance, like people use
Yeah,
psychedelic drugs
trance.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, trance. So the trance to allow himself to be taken over by these jinn,
Mm,
and he would obviously hear voices, and they would command him to do something, and he would do it. And but here's the peculiar thing, is that by doing all that, what he was hoping was to save his people, right? But
yeah.
because the jinn,
Hmm.
they were not there to help him. They were the jinn, the shayateen, and they ended up basically having him destroy his whole civilization was finished because he kept on fighting with Herman Cortez, and they had no chance of winning. He was better off making a truce. But anyway, regardless, what I thought that was interesting, that whole
Yeah.
influence with the jinn. And so that's why I'm not 100% sold on this idea that fasting should be restraining from eating and drinking. And also because there's no example of the previous people in the Quran who did that. So this is definitely a big thing. If you consider God's book to be complete,
Mm.
fully detailed, clear, why is there no example of previous people doing this in the Quran? Even in the story of Moses, the Jews have this story that he didn't eat for and drink for 40 days in the mountain.
Mm.
God
Mm.
doesn't say that. It
Yeah,
doesn't say in the
true. Maybe
Quran.
God was feeding him something. They have no idea.
It's I don't know. The Jews obviously have corrupted their text, and they have made up a lot of stories and lies about the prophets and messengers. And the Muslims have obviously not, abstained from that as well. But I think a lot of the religion of Islam is also a Talmudic um,
Like
vestige.
Kabbalistic sort of influence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even with the religion of the Persians, Zoroastrianism, that
Zoroastrian,
has a
Parsi.
big influence in Islam as well. So all these religions kind of were left in the Islam today, and that's really what we're following. The Muslims are following. They're following this amalgamation of Zoroastrianism and Judaism uh, and the Arabs' own religion, whatever that was.
Mhm.
There's no doubt about it. This idol in Makkah, it is a vestige of an idol that
There
they
was
had back in the day.
there is a book, basically last 2 years ago I was doing some research. Back then I still had the Jali beliefs that the Jal's coming and all of that. But then
Uh-huh.
I found a book called Cult of the Black Cube. Very interesting book. I went in deep, and then the book was talking about some kind of a shaitan who calls himself Saturn. And then they were talking about there's some kind of a hexagram on the planet Saturn. But when you look at it, it's a 2D image. But when you look at it, it's actually a pyramid. Oh, I'm sorry, a cube in 2D. So then I was like, oh, that's the same thing that they've done over there. And then I
Mm.
found out that in Arab, there used to be many Kaabas, many boxes everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Even Yemen too.
yeah, and they said, okay, now this, we have got a great tribe. Let's make this box the big box.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really what I think happened. This whole story about, Muhammad being there and Abraham and all this is fiction. Obviously, if you go back in the ancient records that are non-Muslim, you won't find any reference to the Makkah. So Makkah is not what, this is not where Muhammad was. Where he was, it's an open question. Obviously,
Mm.
there's theories. Petra is a contender. Then there's the Hijaz area in the Yemen area. And God knows best. To be honest with you, I think the people who destroyed this Deen of God in the sense that they corrupted it and brought in this religion of Islam, I'm sure they've worked everything out and they were able to finish all that part of it. Um, if you look at it, what Makkah is just a cult center, and Muslims, they are so invested in this fiction. My uncle, he's a hardline Sunni. He lived in Saudi Arabia for many years. He worked at Aramco, so we have discuss. I wouldn't say there discussions. It's more of him trying to ask me
Convert you.
questions that he's gonna give me answers to. That's
And
those are the kind of
they expect the answers that they would want, that they know.
Yeah, yeah. It's more of them schooling you, really. That's
Yeah.
what it is. I realize it's not a really sincere argument or debate. It's more of like, I know better. I'm gonna ask you a question because you're gonna give me response, and I already have an answer. I don't need to listen to you, which it's pointless. So I stopped, arguing because it's pointless. But I remember one of my discussions I had with him. He said to me, he said, well, what if you don't know where Muhammad is, you don't know where he lived, where he preached. And I said, no, I don't really know, and nor do I care.
Yeah.
Wherever he was, it's pointless. He said, well, that's where Makkah is. And so you if you don't believe that Muhammad came from there, so then there's nothing else to talk about because you don't have an answer to this question. And I remember thinking, I why are you so interested in where Muhammad is? Why are you not interested in where Ibrahim was, or where Musa was, or where Saleh and Thamud and all these
Yeah.
tribes? Why? Because the thing is, because what you really want is you want that support for your idol, and
True.
that's if you take away Muhammad from that, then this is all naked idol worship. There's nothing left because
Exactly.
now what is it? What is it? Why is this place important? And so this is why they did this whole idea that Muhammad was born in Mecca and raised, and he fought and all this. This is so central to religion of Islam, and they will never let go of this idea because their whole religion will fall apart.
Exactly.
And
It's
I
just,
think that's one of the reasons why the Quran doesn't really focus on Prophet Muhammad's location. Even his friends, Abu Bakr, Uthman, Ali,
there's nobody
where
there.
are they in the Quran?
There's nobody there. There's nobody
There's
there. That's
nobody.
what.
There's only one man. It says, and the two, and the second of the two in the cave. It
Yeah.
doesn't even name it.
Yeah.
Name
True.
him.
True. True. So basically, what I've seen is that the Quran don't talk about any Arabic place or any Middle Eastern section as specific. Just
Hmm.
names places which we know in our time are some places named like that. But
Uh-huh.
that doesn't like confirm that that they are the original places that God is talking about.
Yeah, this happens all the time. You have, in the US, you have, England and New London and,
Yeah.
even what Mumbai was Bombay.
Yeah.
So places change their names, and people, when they make new places, they usually take a name from an older world. So this is nothing new. Uh, I'm all I'm saying is that it's really unimportant to focus
True.
on where Muhammad was because there's nothing to gain from that because the Quran doesn't talk about worshiping anything, a stone idol. God said in the
Yeah.
Quran, wherever you would turn, God's face is there, right? So God's
Yeah.
face is everywhere. He doesn't. There's this whole idea of a qibla, right? This is all just nonsense because God's face is everywhere. That means wherever you turn. And so yeah, you pick a qibla for whatever the unity of the Islamic Ummah is the story they tell you. But
Yeah.
so what? You could pick another qibla. It's not that the qibla is important. What matters is that are you remembering God or not? This is really the
That,
key.
that's the main thing. It's, I don't know. It's like somewhat they think that our job is to love this human being and find him and spend your whole life trying to be like him, although they don't even know who he actually is, because Quran speaks only 4 times about the Prophet.
I think that was a good interview, a long interview, and I was able to answer your questions. God willing, I mean, I do encourage people to use your reason. That's why I built that website. Will you not reason? I think that's the biggest thing we have. The reason, that alone is the thing that we can see through the machinations of Satan, Shaitan, and the tricks he plays. We have God's scripture in the Quran. We need to study it carefully and really think and ponder on it, as God said in Himself in the Quran that we should, do they not reason, do they not think. So we need to do all that. And I have written books, like I was telling Brother Asif, 3 books that are available: Will You Not Reason, Tyranny 2.0, and the newest book, God's Written in the Quran. I encourage you to read them, or you can go on my website, check them out, and just try your best to see how things are going and what's going on, and understand that what you've been taught is basically a lie, and but God's scripture is preserved, and God is always available to guide and help, and He is our ultimate protector.
Indeed, indeed. Dear viewers, I will definitely leave a link of all his resource materials, articles, books. And thank you very much, Saeed. That was a very amazing discussion. We opened up a lot of things to think upon so
Yeah,
people can ponder.
yeah.
And inshallah, I'd like to invite you again soon whenever you're free. I know you got a busy because you're also doing projects, you're also putting videos. So
Hmm.
inshallah, definitely, brother, I'll get in touch with you soon. Thank you very
Inshallah.
much, viewers. I hope you guys liked it.
All right. God willing,
Salam.
inshallah.
Peace.
Assalamu alaikum.